Hello and welcome back to the Sporting Fan Podcast. Today I'll speak about the opening 5 rounds of the Super Rugby season. This year, all the Australian teams have played all 5 games, as well as a Fijian draw. So those 6 teams have played all 5 games so far, while the New Zealand sides and Moana Pacifica have been affected heavily by COVID, meaning that they have played less games. The New Zealand sides have played between 3 and 4 games, while Moana Pacifica have played only 2 games. What's going to happen with those games, how they're going to catch them up, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't seen how or when they're going to catch those games up before the finals, so hopefully they do get played. One thing on that COVID, I find it interesting that the New Zealand sides aren't able to fill the gaps where players have tested positive to COVID. This is because they have the NPC, which is for those that don't know, is the competition below Super Rugby in New Zealand. The teams around the world have similar competitions, such as either had or have similar competitions. Australia used to have the NRC, South Africa the Currie Cup. These are the kind of competitions they had. So basically, it was my belief that the NPC was designed to basically refine players, to refine their skills and make them ready for Super Rugby. If they were to get caught up. A lot of players that are not selected for the All Blacks but are Super Rugby players actually go back to the NPC once the Super Rugby Super Rugby season actually finishes. I just don't see why they wouldn't bring those players up from the NPC to Super Rugby if people are sick. In my opinion, there's no point in having the NPC as a feeder for Super Rugby if you're not going to use it as a feeder. I think either make it a fully amateur competition and make it equivalent to a grade competition, or actually use it for its actual what it was designed to be used for. So that's just my opinion on that. Anyway, back to the rugby. It's been quite good this year, especially the New Zealand games. I've quite enjoyed them. The New Zealand game, a lot of teams have been performing quite well, which is good. The New Zealand games, like I said, have been exceptional. The New Zealand games a lot of them have been extremely close. There's been a couple of games where teams have scored 2 tries in the last 5 to 10 minutes to win the game. The first one was the Hurricanes when they beat the Blues a few weeks back, whereby Artie Severe scored the match-winning try. They scored a try just prior to that, and then Artie Severe ran up the sideline to a Tuivasa check, unfortunately. For him, he missed a tackle, and Artie Severe then ran in close to the post, and Hurricanes get the goal and won the game. And the other one was the Chiefs against the Crusaders, where the Chiefs actually scored twice to beat the Crusaders in an upset win there. So those 2 games were absolutely crazy. Great games. Was very pleased to see Roger Tuivasa debut. A lot of people said he had an up and down. Some people think he performed well. Some people think he performed poorly. But personally, I think he performed well. but even with the the Chiefs game with the Crusaders, them beating the Crusaders, I still think the Crusaders are the team to beat when it comes to across competition. They just seem to always find another gear. Like, yes, they may have got beaten, but in saying that, the Crusaders did kind of switch off in that game. But when it comes to finals, I don't think that will happen. Make sure that I think they'll come back bigger and better next time. It'll also be interesting to see how they go about their team when it comes to the finals, because they've got a lot of good players in their team. For example, their back row, they've got Christie, Grace, Blackadder, and Matera. And provided that they are all fit, Christie, Grace, and Blackadder are all Blacks, and Matera has played for the Pumas, and they're all absolute guns. So it'll be interesting to see the makeup of their back row, to see who they'll pick for that, and also it'll also be interesting to see how they will play their back line. Obviously, provided they're fit, Richie Mwanga will be 5'8", and then you have Drummond and Hall filling the halfback role, so one starting, one off the bench. But yeah, from basically the 11 through to the 15 jersey is going to be quite interesting, because they have David Havili, who's currently playing at inside centre, or second 5'8", which I hate that term, if you're in New Zealand. But yeah, he's playing at inside centre at the moment, but he also can play fullback. Personally, I think he's a fullback, and I don't think he's a solid inside centre, but personally I think when he's got a little bit more space, he's a much better fullback. But I'll get to the reason why he's not playing fullback at the moment. They've also got Brendan Enner and Jack Goodhue to come back in the Jack Goodhue's to come back. Brendan Enner's currently playing. Who are playing? Brendan Enner can play wing and in the centres. Jack Goodhue usually plays inside outside. Better outside centre than inside centre, in my opinion, but both are very good players. They've got three blokes that can play to fill in the centres. They've also got Savio Reese and George Bridge on the wing, and they've also got Lester Fayanganuku. Sorry on the pronunciation there, who can play on the wing and outside centre. And all three have been absolutely outstanding. Fayanganuku can play wing and outside, so there's another one that, where does Scott Robinson and he was very close to playing for the All Blacks last year. A lot of people thought he should have actually been picked, me included, at bare minimum in the squad over a couple of other players. But unfortunately for him, he didn't get picked. And then you've also got Will Jordan, who's playing at fullback, which is the reason why David Havili is playing at inside centre. Will Jordan has been an absolute gun. He's been absolutely freakish for a couple of years since he's come in. He's just breaking holes. So Scott Robinson's got a real decision to make, because there's 7 blokes to fill into five positions, and 6 of those blokes are All Blacks, and one of them was very unlucky not to play for the All Blacks. So, and they've only got 5 positions to fill, so it's pretty hard to say who goes and where. So, as I say, better him than me when it comes to Scott Robinson, because I would not like to be picking that team. They're that strong. You'd probably pick at least one of them on the bench, but who do you then leave out for in the finals? It's a tough decision. So yeah, but the Crusaders have been, like I said, strong. They'll be hard to beat again this year. I think that you'll probably find that their they're the favourites to win it despite the loss of the Chiefs, provided they don't have another COVID outbreak like they did about a week or so ago. So, yeah, I think they're still the favourites to win it. The Chiefs, the team that beat the Crusaders, they've been very, very strong as well this year. They've been, I think they've only lost one game. They've been dominating a lot of teams. They, beat the top of the best team in the comp, the Crusaders. So, they've really bounced back over the last from the second half of really lost the Super Rugby Aotearoa. They really bounced back quite strongly. They had basically when they came back after they were doing well, pretty solidly pre-COVID, and then at the start of the 2020 season, and then it got shut down. I still remember they got they about 8 blokes out or something, and then they whacked the Waratahs by about 50 points or something. They beat them like 56-10 or something. They with 8 blokes out, they absolutely annihilated them, and then they had the shutdown. And then they came back from the shutdown where they played the Super Rugby Aotearoa, and they didn't win a game. And then they came back at the start of last year in the 2021 Super Rugby Aotearoa season, and then lost the first 3 or 4 games of the season. And they just came back, and then all of a sudden there was a light bulb moment for them. And everything just changed. They were just beating everyone. Like, when there was that Trans-Tasman, yes, they got beaten against the Reds, but that was only because of some questionable refereeing, where, Damien McKenzie got red carded earlier in the game and they ended up losing. But they've come back quite strong over the last, this first half of this year and the second half of the Super Rugby Aotearoa forward from last year. They could potentially win it this year. The Crusaders and Chiefs have both played 4 games, and they've both won 3. So I reckon the Chiefs could potentially be a bit of a dark horse. And the Crusaders, like I said earlier, the Crusaders would be still the favourites to win it. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs come back and upset them and beat them again. They win a second game. The other New Zealand side that's played 4 games this year is the Highlanders. They've been unlucky. They've just had nothing go their way this year. They've always been competitive. They're always competitive, but they just seem to be, they just seem to be slightly off. And against New Zealand teams, you are that half a second off, or you're just marginally off, you're just going to get slaughtered. You're just going to get put to the sword against them, and that's just what's happening to them. And because, they have been playing well. They've been competitive. They just seem to be competitive without winning. So, how they're going to change that, I don't know, because it's more as there's an old cliche in sport, it's knowing how to win. And because you could have an absolute gun side, and you could have, for example, the Crusaders after Robbie Deans left, they were really, they were still performing well. They made they were always making the finals. They made a couple of grand finals. But between 2000, they lost the final in 2011 to the Reds, and they lost to the Waratahs in 2014. But they just seemed to, they had that kind of thing where they couldn't get over the last line, and then, for the Crusaders, they had that Scott Robinson. Remember, keep in mind with the Crusaders, they had guy during that 2008 to 2017 period where they didn't win a championship. Like they won in 08, the next one they won is 17. And between that period, that blokes like Dan Carter, Richie McCaw, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Reid, they had a good side. So it wasn't like they just lost all their players and they went to they went downhill and went to bloody shit. They were actually a good side, and I think that's where the Highlanders are now, where where the Crusaders couldn't win the finals, and Scott Robinson brought that back. They're just competitive without getting that last step over the line. They just seem to have forgotten how to close out games, and or if they're slightly behind, win ugly. They seem to have, be struggling a little bit against the New Zealand sides when it comes to that. And I don't think it will take much to change it for them. Like, I think that little things that if a coach can see that when they're doing that analysis, they will be able to pinpoint a couple of things, and that I reckon if they can fix those up, they will be able to. What they are exactly, that's for a coach to analyse. But I reckon if they can, it won't take much for them to win a couple of games, whether it be in their last couple of games this year or against New Zealand sides. They'll beat the Australian sides, no doubt. They would win a majority of the Australian, if not all their Australian games. But again, going into next year against the New Zealand sides, hopefully they can change it so they can at least win a couple of games. Then the next two teams, you got the Blues and the Hurricanes, who both played 3 games, and I think their match was almost the match of the season so far that I've watched. That game was absolutely crazy. That was so good. But yeah, they've both teams have played 3, won 2, lost 1, and yeah, they've just both been phenomenal. They hopefully they can make up the 2 games that they've lost, and yeah, but the games they played, they look very, very solid. They look very good, and I reckon the Blues are obviously riding high after winning the Super Rugby Trans-Tasman last year, which was their first competition win since the 90s. So they were riding high and then riding off that success. So, and I reckon they could, I reckon, bit like the Chiefs, especially the Blues, I reckon they could potentially, I reckon the Chiefs are the team that are most likely to do it, but I reckon both the Blues and the Canes could cause an upset. And I reckon they could, if they're in the final, anything could happen. They could, they've got blokes that can win it, win them the game. So, they've got real game breakers. Like the Blues, for example, have, Tuivasa-Sheck, where he's going to play, whether it be, inside, outside, whether it be inside or outside center or fullback. Who knows, that they could do that. You've also got Beauden Barrett there. So they've also got a, all black front row. So they've got a very good side. The Hurricanes with, Geordie Barrett, you just give him a penalty. You never know with him. Like, if he's got an on day with the boot, he can kick them from 55 or 60 meters. So, you don't want to, be giving them too many penalties because they're just going to be slowing them over all day. So they could be, the Hurricanes, I would say, is an outside chance. The Blues, a little bit more so, but still, again, an outside chance. But, they could cause an upset and they could win a couple of games and be a real smoky. They've looked good in the few games that they played, but, yeah, I reckon been real interesting. They've been real good. Then I'm going to go into the Australian sides, and well, they've been okay. They couldn't really go backwards on what they've done the last few years, but I reckon they've slightly improved, but I don't think much has changed. For me personally, I haven't seen much that would say, yep, that's going to be the reason why they're going to get over the line against the New Zealand sides. I can't see that happening. The Waratahs have improved on last year. Last year, they didn't win a game. They've won 3 so far. So, after not winning a game, anything's an improvement. Like winning a game or even drawing a game is an improvement. But they've been so hot and cold this year. They've, they started the season well, with whacking whacking the draw. They beat them by about 30 points, but when they come against the New Zealand sides, I just think it's going to get ugly, I reckon. Unless, teams like the Crusaders, the Blues, the Chiefs, unless they put up a second string team, I reckon they're going to be running up scores of 50 and 60 and 70 points. There's only been a couple of blokes that I could say, yeah, they're solid. One is actually Charlie Gamble. He's a Kiwi, and I believe he's a Kiwi, and he's been exceptional. He's always on the ball. He's always over the ball. And it's something that the Waratahs have really lacked for a number of years. They haven't really had an open side in a number of years that is just on the ball, over the ball, and just making a nuisance of himself. He's always being a pain, and that's what you want in year 7. Not willing, have no disregard for, have absolutely no regard for the body and just willing to take the hit. And I know people will say, well, what about Michael Hooper? Michael Hooper played for the Waratahs, and I will just say, well, you guys are can take your blinkers off, because Hooper has been trash for years, in my opinion. He did it at the start of his career. He did that for the first 2 or 3 years, but I reckon for the last about 5, he's bloody pissed off at outside centre and running it as a bloody outside centre and taking runs. And the people keep saying, but he's running meters of this and running that. And I'm just like, I don't give a crap what his bloody running meters are. I don't give a stuff if he's run 1,000 running meters with the ball in the game. That's not his job. His job is to bloody secure the ball and getting turnovers. That's his job. Do you ever hear, for example, any of the great South African open sides, or someone like, George Smith or Richie McCaw, you just go, these guys aren't even in QE. For example, Peter Staff-Tout, who I believe that is how you pronounce his name. Sorry if it's incorrect. But, he was the open side flanker in 2019 for the South Africans that won the World Cup. The two World Cups before that was Richie McCaw. Do you ever hear anyone talk about their running meters? And the answer is no, because their job is to just smash those rocks, get turnovers. Yes, they might have a run game. Yeah, Richie McCaw scored 20-odd tries or something for the All Blacks, but the thing is, no one really gives a damn about that. They only care about bloody winning. And winning the turnover and winning the rock. And that's Michael Hooper doesn't do that, and that's where Charlie Gamble's really changed things for the Waratahs this year. And I think that's why they have at least been competitive where they weren't competitive last year. Is because they admittedly Michael Hooper didn't play last year, but the Waratahs haven't really been competitive for a number of years now. Basically since they won when they won in 2014. Since then, they've been average to poor every year. And because they just simply had no one to win the ball back. And then that's where Charlie Gamble has really changed things for them. He's stepped into a role where if they need someone to turn the ball over, he's the guy. And yeah, I think he's probably been the best forward. And in terms of the backs, I've been really impressed by Parisi. He just seems to have a motor on him. Like, he just seems to be a machine. Like, honestly, he just runs like he's being shot out of a cannon. And it doesn't matter if it's in the first minute or the 80th minute of the game. He is running as hard as ever. Every run, he just destroyed, like, and he seems to be really strong because a lot of blokes, even bigger blokes than him, they hit him and they can't bring him down. He's still, that leg drive that he's got, and he's so strong and he just pushes through. And he's been, he's been really hard to bring down. And I reckon he's almost, you could almost put him as a regular for the 13. I believe he played a couple of games for the Wallabies last year, but I reckon he could be like a regular in the 13, not just an in and out bloke. The one thing I will say about him though is that he needs to improve his passing. He hogs the ball a little bit much, and it might work against the Australian teams with his strength, but when he comes up against Kiwis, and if he does go up onto the international level, when he plays against teams like New Zealand or the All Blacks or the Springbok or England, France, like these kind of teams, he'll be shot down very quickly, and blokes will just come in on him, and they'll eventually be able to hold him up and get a turnover. So that's one thing. He needs a little bit more subtlety in his game, where he's just not a crash ball. Everyone knows that he's going to run it. So he needs to. That's my only criticism of him. But other than that, he's been very strong this year. Then I'm going to go on to the Brumbies. Top of the table, undefeated, the only team that's undefeated this year. But I don't want to sound like, always negative with the Australian teams, but a couple of the games have been woeful, to say the least. They could have easily lost against the Western Force. They could have easily lost against the Reds. They probably should have lost at least one of those games. They probably should have lost to the Western Force. And the Reds, yeah, they probably should have lost. So they probably should have lost 2 games. And I think, they're a little bit in the same boat as the Waratahs. Like, they've been good enough to win in games that the Waratahs necessarily aren't good enough, haven't been good enough to win the Cup in 2 games this year. But I think they're going to struggle, like the Waratahs. I think they're really going to struggle against the New Zealand sides from what I see, because if you're struggling against teams like the Western Force, no disrespect to the Western Force, you're gonna struggle against the New Zealand sides. Like, then I can't see them being competitive against the Crusaders. I can't see them being, basically the only way, I can't even see them being competitive against the Highlanders, to be honest, who are at the bottom of the table for the New Zealand sides. I really can't see. They just seem to, the last couple of years, they just seem to have gone backwards. They've, the tactics, they seem tired. They don't just seem to be, I don't know, the tactics just seem to be stagnating, and they just seem to, I can't really put my finger on it, but it's just, the tactics seem off, and a lot of teams have figured them out. For example, a lot of teams have figured out that their line out is their main go-to. And if you compete at the line out, whether it be stop their driving more, which is basically what I'm centering it on here, stop their driving more, or actually compete in the air against them and win a couple of line outs, you basically shut them down. A classic example of this is there was a finals game which I believe, from memory, it was against the Hagawares, or it may have been against one of the New Zealand sides, but I think it was the Hagawares. And they just competed at the line-out, and they won a number of the number of line-outs against the throw, and the Brumbies didn't have a plan B. And I'm surprised more teams haven't figured that out, because that's basically, commentators have been saying that for probably, I would say, 5 years maybe, 5 or 6 years, where the lineout's been the number one go-to. And there isn't really a plan B. And the Hagawares showed that. Yet teams haven't really competed really much since then. A couple of teams have, but other teams haven't, and especially the Australian sides, like, you shut them down at the lineup, you're going to beat them. And yeah, they've got a solid scrum, but yeah, I reckon against New Zealand sides that when they'll shut down that line out real quick, real easily, and I just see them getting bullied and decimated against the goods, and I don't think the scores will get as ugly as what they will with the Waratahs, but some teams will I reckon run up a score against them. And this is the same thing with the Reds. The Reds have lost only one game to the Brumbies, which I mentioned, and their tactics have been, again, they've been solid this year. They're second on the table, having lost only that one game. But yeah, again, their tactics are basically the same as the Brumbies. Their tactics all revolve around a solid scrum, winning penalties at the scrum, and then dominating the line out. And that's what basically happened last year against the New Zealand sides. Last year, when they played Super Rugby AU, they really pushed the Australian teams around in the scrum, and and that's how they actually won the championship. Along with Nick Berry refereeing with 16 players, when he was basically playing as a 16th man for the Reds. But apart from that, that's basically how they won all their games last year. Is they dominated in the Super Rugby AU, they dominated in the forwards, and then won a penalty, did the line out, and then score off a rolling maul, or did a move off the line out. But then when they came up against the New Zealand sides, who are better scrummagers, they weren't winning as many penalties from the scrum, and the scrum wasn't just decimating oppositions. And then they go, well, what's plan B? And sure, they got beaten by the Chiefs, but there was a questionable decision with Damien McKenzie where he got sent off. But they won only one of the 5 games against New Zealand sides last year because, and they only just beat the Chiefs with the Damian McKenzie's the best player getting red carded. So, and, you know, having a player off for 20 minutes, they only won by a few points. You know, because the New Zealand teams figured out their tactics. They will, like, have a good scrum and compete at the line out, and then they have nothing. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. And it was so predictable. And yeah, and they just, you know, and in many ways, the New Zealand sides were actually winning the penalties at the scrum. And then, you know, that's why the New Zealand, like, I think, you know, I'll go on to the Force and the Rebels in a moment, but I think that's why there's been a problem with the Australian teams for the last, both at Super Rugby level and international level, that there's a plan A, but only a plan A. When, if you look at the top teams, the international teams as well as the domestic teams, but I'll go on the international. You know, you have a look at, you know, New Zealand, South Africa, England, as much as England struggled a little bit in this Six Nations, but again, England, Ireland, France, you know, you look at the top 5 or 6 nations in the world, they have a plan B, right? And they're able to go, okay, this is what our original game plan was, how we thought we were going to win. This is how we're going to win. And when that doesn't work, they go, okay, let's go to plan B, let's go to plan C. Australians don't have a plan B or plan C. It's just dominate the set. Like, it's basically schoolboy stuff, right? Dominate the set pace and you'll win. And if one of the 2 set pieces in the scrum or lineup doesn't work, then they go, okay, they just throw their hands up and go, we got nothing. So that really needs to improve. If they are, the Reds and the Brumbies want to compete against the New Zealand sides, they really need to have a plan B and C in case their scrum and line out is at bare minimum on par, or if not worse than the New Zealand teams, because they don't get that right, they're just going to get slaughtered. But moving on to the Western Force, they're a bit like the Waratahs. This, you know, they're kind of, you know, Brumbies have been slightly better than the Waratahs. The Force completely like the Waratahs. Been okay without being great. They haven't set the world on fire, but they have put in a few good performances, nearly beat the Brumbies. They probably should have won that. They're a bit unlucky not to win that game. Probably should have won. But, you know, I think they took a lot of confidence out of that game. I think they can improve. There have been a lot of improvements, but it just seems like they're a couple of players short of being a real. And I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful here, but they just seem to be 2 or 3 Blakes short off a real good side, and in key positions. And I just think it's because, you know, this is why you know, the NRL doesn't really want to expand in the WA, is that because no one, when you think about it, no one wants to really play for Western Australia, which is why they got kicked out in the first place. But, you know, when you're from an eastern state, like, for example, I'm from Sydney, right? If I had let's say theoretically I was at that level, which I'm nowhere near that level. But if I had a choice, if I had a contract between the Rebels and the Force, I'll go to the Rebels. simply because it's closer to home. If I have a day off or, day off training or, say everything's finished at, 10, 11 o'clock, I can get on a flight at 1 p.m., be in Sydney at 2:30, spend the afternoon and fly back at 8 o'clock at night or something. Spend a few hours with my family, in Sydney, have a dinner or whatever and then go back to Melbourne. Whereas, with the Force, you can't do that. It's a 4-hour flight, bare minimum 4-hour flight to any of the eastern states where majority of the talent comes from, and blokes just don't want to go be that far away from home. There's a time differential, and it's just everything's a lot harder, and yeah, it's just. Like I said, there are a couple of players short, and I think, like I've said with the other three teams, and what I'll say with the, Rebels, they're going to struggle. I can't see them being even competitive against the New Zealand sides, unfortunately. And the last team is the Rebels, who, to be honest, where do we even begin with it? They are just as bad as what the Waratahs were last season. They've got a lot of good players in that team, but unfortunately they've got a few blokes out, and it really shows that they're, they've got Matt and Moore there, but to be honest, by round 2 or 3, they look cooked. They looked like the season was basically. They were ready for the season to finish, and it looked like a team that really knew that they were out of finals contention and just wanted the season to finish. They were waiting for the last 1 or 2 games to happen, and then just basically put their feet up and relax. And you just go, and that was after about round 2 or 3, and you just think, geez, there's another bloody. 10 games, they got another bloody 10 games to go, 8 or 10 games to go, and they're already, and you just go, geez, if they're already doing this after week 2, what are they going to be like in week 8 or 9 when they're playing the Crusaders or playing the Chiefs? This is, the scores are getting ugly against the Australian teams. Imagine what it's going to be against New Zealand team. It could literally, get to an 80 or 90 point, 100-0 score lines. The scores could get really bad, and I hope for their sake it doesn't, because quite frankly, no one wants to watch it, and to be honest, it's not good for anyone when you get those kind of score lines, but unfortunately, that's the only way I can see it going, is that they're going to get thrashed, and they just look cooked. They look like they don't want to be there. They will look like they just want the season to end and click open a beer and go home. But unfortunately, they've still got several games to go, and I hope it improves. Now, moving on to the Pacific teams, who I said at the start of the year that I was really looking forward to. The first I'll go into is the Fijian draw. Other than that first game against the Waratahs, they've always been there and thereabouts, and they've actually picked up the first win against the Rebels. And yeah, they've. You can tell that, again, this isn't meant to be disrespectful, but all new teams, they're struggling to find the combinations. But I reckon that. I reckon they could potentially, become a very competitive side. I reckon, they've always been competitive. They've been competitive. I reckon, give it a couple of years when they have played together for a few seasons, and hopefully a couple of Fijians from overseas come back and play for them, and you never know. Within it, by maybe even the 2025 side, provided that they, Super Rugby, stays with them, I reckon they could have a really good side within a few years, and I reckon they could really push some teams, and hopefully it'll also mean that Fijian players don't defect, which is the same with Moana Pacifica, because I reckon this could be so good for not only for Fiji but the world game where we've got a really strong island. Because so many good players come from Fiji, I reckon this could really change their trajectory. And you never know, like by the 2027 World Cup, it could potentially roll into the international team, where more players are playing, and they could potentially be a real like for the international team. Use this kind of like what the Argentinians did with the Jaguares, where, yes, still pick players from Europe and what have you, and wherever they play, whether it be Fiji or Japan, Europe or Japan, I should say. Sure, pick those, but if a lot of their best players are playing for the draw, they could really, the Fijians could use that as a breeding ground, and you never know, the Fijians could make a quarter-final or even a semi-final by 2027 and onwards. Like, they could really push a lot of teams and beat teams, which would be great for World Rugby to have at least one of the island teams be competitive. And the same thing, and that moves me on to the Moana Pacifica, who have been really unlucky this year. They've had their first two games got decimated with COVID, so they couldn't play. And then unfortunately, over the weekend, they had their last. I think it was their fourth game got cancelled because of COVID, and so they've only played two games, and they have struggled. They got beaten comfortably in both games against the Crusaders and the Chiefs, but in saying that, they played against the two best New Zealand sides, and the Crusaders and the Chiefs had already had 2 or 3 games under the belt, so they were already match fit, and a lot of people that haven't played rugby or will say, well, they had their whole off season to get fit. Which is true, but the thing is, you could run on the treadmill, run laps, do as many Broncos or beep tests or however you do your fitness. You can do as many of those as possible, but it's just different when you get on the field. Like, the level of fitness on that is quite different, and it really showed in the first 2 games. But I reckon in a few years' time, like the draw, if they can keep improving, keep getting games, I reckon they could really be competitive in a lot of games. And I reckon, within a few years, you never know, they could be cause up, when they do, well, hopefully when they beat, the New Zealand sides and the Australian sides and that, they're not called upsets. They go, they're not, if they're on the TAB, if you look at the TAB or the sports bet or whatever, instead of having them, the Crusaders at $1 and they're at bloody $10 or something, the Crusaders are $1.40 and they're at, $2 or something. So at least TAB is saying it's not a foregone conclusion and people don't go, well, we obviously expect the Crusaders to win, but we wouldn't be surprised, or the Crusaders or the Chiefs or the Hurricanes or whoever, oh yeah, we wouldn't, we expect the New Zealand team to beat them, but we wouldn't be surprised if they do win. It wouldn't be classified as an upset per se. It would be more saying, and this is for the draw as well, they are more saying, okay, they're going to give this. the other team might be slight favourites, but they could definitely push them, and they could definitely win here. And that's where I think they could, and that will obviously go on to Samoa and Tonga as well, where they could potentially get those good players instead of getting them to defect to New Zealand or Australia or one of the European teams, international teams. They're playing for them, and then same with the draw. Could be really good for the World Game, where if they could get 2 or 3, if at least one of the islands really competitive on the world stage, if not all 3, it would be absolutely fantastic. And I'd love to see it. Hopefully that all happens, and that's my review. I'm interested to hear what you think. Tell me if I'm being a little bit harsh on the Australian teams here, a little bit soft or too nice to the New Zealand teams, or both. I would like to hear your thoughts. And until next time, thank you for listening.